Barn and I have kissed and made up. Where have you got the Roosters finishing?
As a spread, I've got them basically finishing anywhere inside the top 8. I can't see them missing the 8. But, obviously I'll nail it down when we do our ladder. But anywhere from, say 2nd to 8th.
Cowboys, apparently, is where we're going next. Got to find them. They talk about the draw while I find them.
Finished 11th last year. On the back of a pretty disappointing season, actually, considering what they put up the previous year. I've lost my little sheet with the draw on it. Fantastic. That's good. I'll find that again in a minute.
Oh, yeah, keeps good.
Where have I put it? No, I've lost it. Here it is.
They finished 11th.
They did finish 11th. The Cowboys have 4 games against the bottom 3, so that's not too bad for them. But they have 6 games out of a possible 8 against the top 4. So probably one of those middle type draws, but slightly tougher than the average.
Okay, this year they have lost Peter Hiku, Namo and Riley Price. James Tarmo has retired. And they've picked up Jake Clifford, Ollie's favourite players, back. Thomas McKaylee and Viliami Valia from the Warriors. Actually, that's interesting. And I believe, speaking of draws, their first 7 games, 5 are on the road. But then, obviously, that means the back end there's quite a few. So a tough start. Best 17. Drinkwater, Felt, Valia, Holmes, Tuolangi, Dearden, Townsend, McLean, Robson, Tamalolo, Nanai, Lukey, Cotter, Bench, Granville, Hess, Leilua, and Fini Fuiaki. 2 years ago, they gassed out when they had the hot run. Last year, Payten suggested they were too soft. They did beat Penrith and Storm through June, but didn't, back end struggled a bit in some of those games. But at the end of the day, finished exactly the same as Manly and Para and all those other teams. Are they still in that clump barn?
I can't see it changing too much. I think they were flattered a little bit last year with they got out of a few of those games just on the back of the brilliance of Drinkwater's ball playing and running game. Val Holmes chiming in there for putting on some points and scoring a clump of points in a game where they probably didn't deserve to. Where their biggest disappointment for mine last year was the forward pack, considering how good they were the previous year. And we saw a lot of them sort of in and around that origin period as well, and they played some brilliant footy during that time and at the back end of the year. So just that start, obviously, to the first 10 weeks or so of last year really killed their season off.
It's funny because collectively they feel small.
Absolutely.
It wasn't until Luciano Leilua came back that you go, geez, he's a monster. And I'd never really thought that compared to some other forward packs that we've seen Luciano.
But as you said, they just outworked everyone the year before.
Yeah,
even being that
they were
smaller.
the fittest and had the most energy along with Parramatta, I would say, a couple of years ago, and then it just didn't happen this year.
And with that smaller pack comes the responsibility to have that really fast defensive line speed, which wasn't there for probably half of the last year for the Cowboys, which led to them, falling from where did they come from? 2nd, 3rd, I think, all the way down to 11th, which was, that's a massive drop off for anyone. Coaches under a bit of pressure, I think, again this year. If they drop another peg or two from where they were this year, then there might be a few question marks around the way that Todd sets up his team going into a season. But some very good X-factor players, as I mentioned, in Drinkwater and Holmes that can provide points out of basically nothing at times. Their organisation in the middle of the field was less than to be desired last year around the kicking game of Chad Townsend. Dearden took times to get some games, did not seem to get going at all, and then other games was one of the best players on the field.
The problem is literally Drinkwater and Holmes are their only points of attack at times.
Generally, yes.
It's a big...
And Dearden chimes in occasionally.
Dearden's very much a running 5'8". I wonder if this is a year that he takes the reins. Just signed a long-term deal. He's the guy, according to Todd.
Vice captain now, I think, too,
yeah,
isn't
so
he?
I wonder if this is the year they say, right, you're in charge, and he transitions towards being the 7.
Yep.
And the byproduct of that is it's a big year for Townsend.
100% it is.
Because he might not be there by the end of it.
Yes. Yeah, especially if they do have a poor start to the season, and he may not be there halfway through the year. There are a couple of other younger options in Weaver and Clifford that you mentioned that could come in and play in those positions. But again, a big reliance on being one of the fitter teams in the comp because their pack is that little bit smaller. They do have the likes of Tamalolo, Luciano, and Jordan McLean, who are not small by any means, but they do play limited minutes these days, with especially Tamalolo and Jordan McLean. There were some games where they were incredible last year, but big parts of the season they weren't, and that left it's just too much to do for some of their smaller forwards, I think, that were controlling the middle of the field.
How important is this year for that back row? So, Lukey, who was injured for a lot of it, Nanai, Finafanuaki, if I pronounce that right,
Luciano.
And Luciano.
I think Finiaki's more of a middle
okay.
for mine, so I think you'll see him in that rotation. At the moment, doesn't look like he'll start the season, but I think he definitely has to be there by halfway through the year. Massive body, looks to have all the right attributes for a middle forward. Bit of an offload, bit of footwork as well as being a large human, so he can do some damage through the middle of the field there. And for mine, I'd be trying to get him into this squad earlier than later. Lukey was a big spruik, and he was in front of Nanai there a couple of years ago until he spent a fair bit of time injured in the last 2 seasons. Nanai sort of got the jump on him there, but they both do have a tremendous skill set, and both look like very good first-grade footballers going forward. So they will rely on them heavily during the year to provide options to break the defences down on the edges.
Any thoughts on anything?
I'm struggling to see a hell of a lot of positives for the Cowboys this year. Like, they are, with a couple of exceptions, a very middle-of-the-road type team. They don't have a lot of X factor and skill in a lot of areas that are going to get them ahead. Like, as stated, the forward pack's quite small. When you've got Luciano as one of the biggest blokes on the field, that's probably going to be a problem. I think Drinkwater's going to come back to the earth a bit this year. He had an absolute season last year, but I think there's going to be a lot more attention on him because a lot of other teams know what he's capable of now.
Is the long term him at 6 and Dearden at 7?
I would be. Yeah, Townsend, I don't see him being there by the end of the year. He's been middling for quite a while, and it's getting to a point where it's not going to do them any good to have him in the team, especially if they start poorly. He's going to be under fire for quite a bit.
The only issue there, I think, is anyone that you put back to fullback doesn't provide anywhere near as much upside in attack.
Holmes?
As a whole hitter, yes, but he's not someone who's going to go sweeping around the back and pick up the winger and put him away for tries as often as someone like Drinkwater was doing last year.
Yeah.
Quite possibly opens up a few more options in and around the ruck with Drinkwater then providing balls for the likes of the second rowers, but it probably does take away a little bit of the attacking potency out wide. So.
Well, the only other thing, option is it does open up to potentially bring a Valia in or have Valamine, who are tackle busters and can have an offload that Val can sniff around. But, that's all, I guess, pie in the sky stuff. Ruben Cotter, what we get, he's going to work his ass off, probably representative of what we get from this team. What are we saying? End of the day, what are we saying?
Puts his head where most people wouldn't put their feet.
Actually not.
He does not mind getting in and getting involved.
For better or worse.
With Ruben Cotter. It's going to be very reliant on the 9, 7 and 6, I think, being able to add to the...
Just quickly touch on Reece Robson, obviously got to Origin. Has had
quite a good defensive
hooker.
Yeah. Very good at reading the right time to jump and run from hooker.
The most running hooker in the comp.
Yep. I think
he took over from Cook last year with that.
Yeah. And does seem to pick the right time to take off. Has pretty good acceleration, which can cause obviously a lot of issues if the ruck gets a bit untidy. His service off the ground is not the best. It's not the worst either, but there's players out there that do throw a much better ball out of dummy half than what he does. But by no means is it poor. He's a bit better when it's shortened up. He's pretty good at picking up some forwards on the roll towards the try line, but when he starts to try and throw it that bit wider out to the halves, I think the ball comes out a bit slower than some of the other hookers in the competition.
Yeah, you're right. Ultimately, what do we say though? I guess I'll go first. I have a little bit of concern. I feel it's a year where some of the bigger forward backs are going to belt some of these teams out of games.
Yeah.
And if they can't match that, they'll match energy and they'll beat some of the lesser teams. They'll probably put a space in some of the lesser teams. I think until there's sort of fundamental change in that spine and they bite the bullet with Townsend, and also, I don't feel like we're piling on the bloke because he seems like a good guy and he's a premiership winning halfback and everything else, but defensive liability these days as well. And I just not really interested in them. I think they'll be in that clump, but they'll be the bottom half of that clump, sort of that 8 to 12. And yeah, what do you reckon, GT?
I'm right there with you. That's exactly where I've got them in that.
Yeah.
They're definitely not going to be challenged towards the top of the table, but they won't be stone motherless last either. They'll be in that pack.
Exactly the same. I think their best gets them into 7th. Their worst could have them in the bottom 4, but
Yeah.
I would expect them to be around the bottom of the 8 in that 10th, 11th position.